while we're talking about quarterbacks, Daniel, how did you take Kevin O'Connell's comment when I got my one question in about Kirk Cousins? You were there when he told me you get one question. The day before.
You used it well, though.
Thank you.
You timed it. You paced yourself, tried to get him comfortable, and then boom.
I picked my spot. That's I'm a professional spot picker. But what'd you make of his answer where he's like, he's a process guy, and he basically said he's going to hit free agency? Daniel?
Yeah, I think he wants to listen to what's out there, and look, I sit there and look at it and go, okay, well, you're playing indoors. You're the system really well. You have a great relationship with Kevin. You're throwing to the best wide receiver in the NFL in Jefferson. You also have a stud tight end and a stud number 2 receiver and a solid offensive line. Like, why would you ever want to leave Minnesota? But I to me, the Atlanta thing that's what this feels like. Hey, I want to talk to the Falcons, and is there a huge difference in the money that's being put on the table between those two teams? Because Atlanta, hey, also plays indoors. We know about the weapons that they've had, young, talented weapons that they have, both in the backfield as well as out at the receiver position, and a solid offensive line. So they have some really intriguing pieces in place there. But that's what this feels like to me, is let's talk to the Falcons. He's got a history there with the offensive coordinator as well, so there's be some familiarity. That's what it looks like to me, is that this is Kirk wanting to learn everything about the Atlanta Falcons and then putting those two offers on the table.
And now, Daniel Jeremiah, let's talk about Russell Wilson. It's amazing because I guess, let's put it this way, certainly the first several combines we worked with together, okay, were all about, when we're looking at quarterbacks, who's going to be the Russell Wilson? Who's going to be the one in the middle of the third round? And we can even have that conversation here. And I would refer to Russ as the prototype of the diamond in the third round rough. And now it's just a totally different conversation about Russell Wilson around the combine and around the NFL. And you obviously had a front row seat for a handful of his starts with Denver. Your last Chargers-Broncos game that you called for Chargers Radio was Jarrett Stidham's first start after Russ got benched. So you're a perfect person to ask. It's the general question of what's happened to Russell Wilson?
Well, it's interesting. We just went from one conversation to the next, because him and Kirk Cousins, same draft, both third, fourth round picks, both go on to have tremendous success. Then we look at where they are right now. Kirk Cousins hitting the market, and we're talking about how high does that number go above, $40 million. And now Russell's been cut. And because of the offset in the contract, Rich, he's, you could get him for really, really cheap. I think he still has good football left. I think it's efficient, manage the game Russ versus, the dynamic play creator that we saw from the Super Bowl teams. That was going to happen. I mean, I think when you look at how quarterbacks age, Kirk Cousins, even coming off of Achilles, athleticism is not really required to play the game the way he plays it. Athleticism is a key component to what makes Russell Wilson. So as that starts to decline, his value isn't quite as great. But Rich, I look around and, I don't buy the fact that there's 32 quarterbacks better than Russell Wilson, this version of Russell Wilson at this point in time. And the fact that you're going to get a veteran with experience, and you should be able to get him on the cheap, I think makes him, an attractive option for teams.
Well, I'm sure the fact that he can say, I'll play for the league minimum, which I imagine he will do, because there's the offset. Whatever he makes from another team is how much less Denver has to pay him. And I'm not to ascribe anything to Russ. I imagine he'd like to stick Denver with the largest tab it can be stuck with. So I'm not saying he's not an attractive option for people financially. I'm just, what do you see on tape, on film? Because the conversation you just said about people having where, hey, the physical skill set that he needs to be the old Russ that cooked doesn't maybe exist anymore, and he needs to be the game manager guy. I'm wondering if there's that struggle internally with him on that front as well right now. And that's how I lay that at your feet. Dan?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just, to me, when you watched him last year and you watched him in end of half situations and in end of game situations, and I think he had 3 comeback wins last year, as well as went down the field several times before the half in a 2-minute situation where it was put on him, and he still has some of that. I mean, that's not. I don't want to make it sound like he can't do it. I just think you have to pick your spots, and he can do it. And I thought I saw in those key moments he made plays. The Buffalo game on Monday night's a great example. After we find out after the fact, he had been told he didn't even know if he was going to start.
Right.
So with all that swirling around, I still think he can play winning football is the way that I would describe it. And I think if you've got a team with some pieces in place, I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and I'm like, man, that just makes too much sense to me because you bring him in. To me, it's an upgrade over Kenny Pickett. You've got a good defense in place. They've added to the offensive line. I think you'll see them continue to add to the offensive line this year. Broderick Jones last year really came on and played well. They've brought over Samalo from the Eagles who played well. So they've added good pieces there. They've got the 2 good running backs that has kind of a Seattle vibe to it to me, Rich. And I think you get them on the cheap. It's pretty attractive. The offset thing, by the way, is fascinating to me because I had that when I got let go in Cleveland and I got put on Randy Lerner scholarship. I had 18 months left on my contract, so I got offered a couple other scouting jobs, and I'm explaining this to my wife, and she goes, "So you can stay home and help me with the 4 kids under 10 for the same amount of money, or you can go travel 150 nights a year and not make $1 extra." I go, "Yeah, that's how it works." She goes, "What are we talking about here?" So that's why I started messing around with the media a little bit for that 18-month period. Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern for free.